Hello, this is Mr. Chabry, and we have another narrated Pokemon battle. So in this battle, we're going to use different Pokemon from different tiers, and of course, some of the Pokemon you notice on my team are Pokemon that I drafted for the PGBL, and I really wanted to try them out and see like what they can live hits from, how they can work in battle. So from my PGBL team, my Kentucky Typhlosions, I brought Seismitoad and Chandelier, and we're going to try them out. So looking at my opponent's team, Seismitoad is going to be very important. I need to keep this thing alive as long as possible, because not only does it deal very well with Landorus, but it also deals very well with the Victini. So I'm going to actually lead off with it, because it's a pretty safe lead looking at my opponent's team. Nothing is really super effective against it. The main thing is I do not want it to get poisoned. I'm going to go ahead and Scald first turn because my opponent doesn't really have anything that really wants to take a Scald. I mean, of course, Chansey is here, but yeah, I mean, Chansey is here, and that thing could take a Scald very well, and my opponent's going to go into Hitmonchan, take the Scald, and then go into Chansey, because I think Chansey is a better switch on a Seismitoad. I think, honestly, the Hitmonchan came out as a possible Rapid Spin. But now I'm going to go into my Chandelier, as my opponent has the Chansey, and I'm going to go ahead and Trick, because I've got the Choice Scarf, and the thing about defensive Pokemon is that they do not like having a Choice Scarf at all. So I'm going to go ahead, Choice Scarf. This thing is now locked into Toxic. I have its Eviolite, but Eviolite's not going to do anything for Chandelier. So I'm just going to stay in and just Fire Blast, because I know this thing is locked into Toxic, but we miss. And honestly, Fire Blast probably wouldn't really do that much to Chansey, because Chansey has crazy special defense. Here, I'm going to go ahead and go into Beedrill, because I know this guy is locked into Toxic, and it's pretty safe to switch into Beedrill here, because Beedrill cannot be Toxic. So now my opponent is going to go into Landorus, get that Intimidate, and I'm actually just going to U-turn out, because I was pretty sure my opponent would switch out like that. I was pretty sure my opponent wouldn't let me have Chansey, even though it's basically crippled with that Choice Scarf. It still can take a lot of hits, and it could probably threaten some of my Pokemon. So, of course, we're going to hit this thing with a U-turn. It does barely anything because of the Intimidate. Lando resists Bug-type moves, and Lando does have decent bulk. So now I've got my Seismitoad back in. Seismitoad, like I said, is going to be the biggest thing. I need to keep this thing healthy. I need to get as much damage on my opponent as I can. And yeah, Seismitoad is going to be my MVP. I can already feel that. But my opponent's actually just going to U-turn out and go into Chansey here to take the Scald. And of course, like I said, this thing does have Toxic. We have seen that. I'm pretty sure it has probably Stealth Rocks, Seismic Toss, and Soft Boil, if I had to guess. But now my opponent's actually going to go back into Lando, predicting the Earthquake. But honestly, I don't really have a reason to stay in with Seismitoad, because like I said, this thing is going to be my win condition. I do not want it to get Toxic. So I'm going to switch out and go into Kartana expecting the Toxic. But since my opponent brought in Lando, yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and Leaf Blade, because I know Kartana has pretty good defense. So we're just going to Leaf Blade, get as much damage on this Lando, because if I can get rid of Lando, then I could easily go for Earthquakes. A lot more easier, that is. But now this Victini is going to come back in, and of course this thing is going to be a huge threat for this whole entire battle. So I'm going to go back into Seismitoad. Seismitoad is really, really good against this thing. It can take the, what's that electric move it gets? I think Bolt Strike. That's the electric move that Victini gets. It could take a V-Create, as you see there. V-Create, it did do a nice, considerable chunk, but the thing is, Seismitoad actually did pretty good there. Of course, I don't really want to take too many of those, because that would be a problem for me. But here I'm just going to stay in an Earthquake. I need to get rid of Victini, because that thing is a huge threat to my entire team, but my opponent's actually going to go into the Chansey here. But now, yeah, Seismitoad gets some nice leftover recovery, so there's that. I'm pretty sure I could take another V-Create pretty easily. But now my opponent is actually going to do another switch into Lando right here and get that Intimidate again. But yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and Stealth Rocks this time. So yeah, I really wanted to get these rocks up. Of course, that was kind of risky because Toxic was there, but I think my opponent didn't really want to give up Chansey just yet. So my opponent went ahead and sent out the Lando, and I got some nice Stealth Rocks up on the field. And now my opponent's going to go for Stealth Rocks and let me have this Lando. So now without Lando, my opponent has to be a little bit more scared of Earthquake going on. And another good thing is Seismitoad has actually gotten some really nice leftover recovery from this whole situation. So yeah, this thing's almost about 60% health. So I'm going to actually switch out. I know Sableye usually goes for status moves and stuff, and I do not want that to happen. So I'm going to go into my Sylveon, because if my opponent goes for a Will-O-Wisp, that doesn't bother Sylveon too much. So yeah, and that's what my opponent's actually going to do. Just go ahead, go for the Will-O-Wisp. And the only thing that Sableye is type-wise weak against is Fairy type. So that's another good reason to have a Fairy type Pokemon, and that's what I've got here, my Sylveon. So now my opponent's going to go into Jirachi here, expecting the Hyper Voice, which is my main attacking move on this thing. I'm pretty sure some of them might have Moonblast, but I think Hyper Voice is the better of the moves, because if with Pixelate, it gets more damage boost. So here we're going to just go for a Wish, and of course I am burnt on my poor Sylveon, but I really want to get a Wish onto the Seismitoad, because like I said, Seismitoad is going to be my win condition. It's really good against most of my opponent's team, and now that Lando is gone, there's not really much that wants to take an Earthquake. Of course, my opponent has this Jirachi, which is weak to it. My opponent also has the Victini, which does not want to take an Earthquake at all. But now my opponent's actually going to switch the Victini, keep it alive, and go back into the Chansey. And Chansey's going to take some Stealth Rock damage, and I'm just going to go ahead Earthquake, because, like I said, Lando is gone. So there's not really anything that can come in on an Earthquake. So with this Earthquake, we get rid of the Chansey, and that's actually pretty good, because I do not want this thing to set up Toxic on me, and I don't want it to, you know, take the special hits that I need to hit some of my opponents with. And plus, with that gone now, I can easily go for Shadow Ball with my Chandelier, so that's another really good thing. And now I've got my Chandelier in, so that way I can block the Rapid Spin. So that's a good thing about having a Ghost type. You can spin block. And of course, if my opponent did go for a Fighting type move, Chandelier doesn't care about that either. So now I've got my Chandelier here. Of course, it is holding the Eviolite, which isn't going to do anything at this point. But my opponent's actually going to go for Ice Punch. I'm not sure why. I don't know what my opponent was predicting there. There wasn't really a reason for me to switch out, since I just went into Chandelier. And even if my opponent froze me, I do have Fire Blast, and that could thaw me out. So I don't know exactly what my opponent was thinking with that move. But my opponent's actually going to swap out here. And I'm just going to hit this thing with a Shadow Ball. And of course, Sableye, it does have good defense, but its special defense is actually kind of lacking a little bit. But unfortunately, we're going to go down to the Toxic. Of course, it was bound to happen, and I just needed to get some sort of damage with my Chandelier. And that's honestly what I wanted to do, see how much damage it does. And now my opponent has the Sableye, and instead of switching it to keep it alive, my opponent's going to set up the Sunny Day. So I'm kind of nervous what that might mean. I don't know exactly what my opponent is wanting to do, but I think my opponent has a plan, because you don't usually see Sableye carrying Sunny Day unless there's a Pokemon that can abuse it. I'm going to go for the Hyper Voice. That will finish off the Sableye, and now my opponent is going to send out the Victini. So it's pretty clear what my opponent wanted to do. Set up the Sun, so V-Create will do that much more damage. So I'm going to go ahead and Protect, because I'm pretty sure this thing is banded. That's what I'm thinking it is, because, yeah, most of them are actually banded. I've seen a few of them that might be Scarfed, but most Victini are banded. So we're going to Protect, see what this thing wants to lock itself into, and it seems like it wants to lock itself into V-Create. So I think I'm hoping that I could take one. I'm not sure what I was thinking there. I might have just been sacking off this thing anyway, or might have just been going for a Wish. But since I've lost my poor Sylveon, I mean, it's not that much of a problem, because it took care of the one thing it took care of. So that's probably why I got rid of it there. The only thing it was really needed for was the Sableye. Now I'm going to go into Beedrill. I know Beedrill can outspeed this thing, and my opponent's actually going to save the Victini, and that's actually pretty smart because Victini is going to be a problem. And my opponent sends out the Hitmonchan. We just hit it with a Drill Run. That will finish it off. And now Jirachi is going to come out, and I've already seen Wish on it, so I do not think this is a Scarf set here. I'm just going to Drill Run this thing as well, get as much damage as I can, as my opponent just goes for a Thunder Wave, and that's actually pretty bad for me because now I don't really have anything that can outrun Victini very well. But I do have this Beedrill, and it is paralyzed, so that's going to be a problem because Beedrill could have easily taken care of my opponent's last 2 Pokemon with Drill Run. We're going to take a nasty Iron Head, and poor Beedrill will go down to that. Beedrill does not have good defense at all, so there's that. But now we're going to go into Kartana. Of course, Kartana is honestly the only thing I do have that outspeeds my opponent's Pokemon. So I'm going to go for the Sacred Sword, and I really need to keep Kartana in good health here. But even with that Sacred Sword, the Jirachi survives, and now my Kartana is paralyzed. So that's actually very bad for me because now I don't really have anything that can really reliably face down Victini. Of course, we're going to still outspeed this Jirachi, showing me this is more of a slower defensive set. But I've already gathered that from what it had, Wish, Thunder Wave, and Iron Head. But now here comes the Victini, and this thing is a huge threat. Of course, there's nothing Kartana can do to it because this thing has only Steel type, Grass type, and a Fighting type move, and another type. I can't remember off the top of my head what it is, but my opponent's actually going to lock himself into Zen Headbutt because my opponent knows that I still have the Seismitoad, and V-Create's not going to be doing enough damage to Seismitoad. So my opponent's going to go ahead, continue with the Zen Headbutt, as Kartana is fully paralyzed the last 2 turns that it's on the field. So that's actually very unfortunate. It probably could have got some sort of chip damage in. And I'm going to go Como-O. Of course, Como-O is weak to Zen Headbutt, but I'm hoping maybe it can take one. I'm not sure. I know Como-O could have decent defense. I don't think this one has any defense investments, though. But unfortunately, it's not enough to take it, and I don't get any chip damage on this thing. So now the question is, can Seismitoad break through flinches? Because if my opponent gets enough flinches, it's over for Seismitoad. And we're going to go ahead, break through the Zen Headbutt, and go for an Earthquake, and that will finish off the Victini. So that was actually very scary there. I know my opponent probably could have got the victory if Seismitoad was flinched out, and that would have been a very annoying way to lose. But luckily, Seismitoad was able to pull through at the end and finish the game in our favor. So, if you like this, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and I will see you in the next Pokemon video.